Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming along to Skeptics in the Pub tonight. A couple of things before we start. I also do a weekly podcast called the Skeptic Zone, and I hope you'll indulge me for a second because I'll take this opportunity to do the introduction to the very next episode going out on the weekend. So this is your chance to really ham it up. Okay, you've got to pretend that you're really enthusiastic, and I'm sure you can do it. Okay. Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 783 for the 8th of October 2023. Richard Saunders coming to you live from Skeptics in the Pub. We didn't even have to rehearse that. That was really good. Thank you. Coming up on this week's show, Skeptics in the Pub, of course. I might be asking a few interesting questions from pubbers tonight. We also have the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham. And Tim's going to be talking about Phoney Fauna. Flabbits. Flabbits, Tim. Flabbits. Find out more about that with the Book of Tim. And we have the Australian Skeptics Newsletter, read by Adrienne Hill in Calgary, Canada. Yes, it all makes sense. And the Trove section, looking into historical newspapers. We're going to be looking at naturopaths and homeopathy. All that coming up on the Skeptic Zone podcast this week. But now it's time for me to not run down the stairs. I'm going to stay right here and give my talk tonight, which is the Skeptical Box of Tricks. So let's get on with the show. That wonderful sound you're hearing is the sound of a skeptical barbecue here at Skeptical headquarters. It's the Skeptic Zone headquarters, actually. I'm here with Skeptical Steve Roberts. Hello, Steve.
I don't believe this.
Thank you very much. Steve Roberts, we've known each other for too many years. Far too many years.
Too many years. Yeah.
We just had, surely one of the highlights of the year was a wonderful long lunch with Dick Smith.
Yes, it was.
It was a wonderful experience.
It was brilliant. The raconteur.
Yes, the stories.
The stories, the things he's done.
And his current concerns, which we were taking on board and listening to. And just the pleasure of his company. And then we had a little tour of his helicopter, which was very good.
It's very nice, yeah.
Listeners around the world who may not know the name Dick Smith is one of the founders of Australian Skeptics. He is known as an adventurer, a philanthropist, an entrepreneur, a charitable man who's made a splendid use of his resources and his life. He's founded Dick Smith Electronics.
He was successful in business in his early years and made a bit of money, and then had the sense to retire without staying on that treadmill and making more money.
But doing good things.
And doing good things with the money he'd made and having fun and doing things he liked.
So we greatly appreciated the fact that we could spend some time. Oh, you want me to turn the chops over?
No, I'll get on with it.
Oh, you turn the chops over on the barbecue.
You're busy making broadcasts.
And one of the topics of the moment, of course, and one of the topics I know you've been interested in for a very, 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 very long time are UFOs.
Yes.
And lately there's, that sausage looks like it's really done. Why don't we move those to the side? That's it. There we go. I've spoken to you for many years on and off about UFOs, but lately there's a new UFO fad with Ross Coulthart, the journalist who's written a book, and he's promoting David Grush and everything. What do you make about all this?
Oh, it's a new fad because there's been a congressional inquiry. Not that that's new, but they've given it a pressure over the years. There's no new UFO sightings or information of significance.
Not really. I mean, there's the famous videos we see from the US military, the Air Force and the Navy and stuff, but Mick West has shown very, very, I don't want to say conclusively, that's not the word I'm looking for.
Very thorough analysis.
Thorough analysis.
Yeah.
And there's just nothing mysterious anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know exactly what the aircraft was that they were tracking, but they're certainly could be terrestrial. There's no need to reason that they were extraterrestrial.
No, it's a postulate you don't need to make.
Yeah.
There's nothing new really, but they had this inquiry and the topic has sort of become live again, along with new conspiracy theorists and whatnot. No new sightings or information of relevance.
Not really. No.
The topic died about 30 or 40 years ago.
Well, I think it'll die again because with all this talk about any day now, here it is, the congressional hearings. It must be all happening. And the weeks go by, and the weeks go by, and the weeks go by, and people...
No aliens land on the White House lawn.
No aliens, and it's not happening, and people think about other things. And in some years down the track, there'll be a new revelation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a chop that looks like South America.
That chop does look like South America. And the sausages look like sausages. They all look very tasty. Anyway, just a shout-out and a big thank you to our patron, Dick Smith, who's one of the founders of the Australian Skeptics. And, folks, if you really want to have a great insight into Dick Smith, just Google him, especially on YouTube. And if you Google James Randi in Australia, which was made 43 years ago, you'll see Dick Smith in fine action, in fine form with James Randi. I sincerely recommend you do that.
Yep. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Steve. Let's have these sausages and chops.
Hey everyone, this is Brian Dunning from the Skeptoid Podcast. I have just completed my new feature documentary film about the real science behind the UFO phenomenon, tantalizingly entitled The UFO Movie They Don't Want You to See. Well, here's your chance to spite them and to see it anyway. If you're going to be at Csicon 2023 in Las Vegas this October, we're having a free screening. All you need to do is RSVP, and you can do that at skeptoid.com/events. The UFO Movie at Csicon 2023, skeptoid.com/events.
And now, a reading from the Book of Tim. With Tim Mendham.
Hi, just in case you don't know, I'm Tim Mendham. I'm editor of the Australian Skeptics magazine, The Skeptic, and executive officer of the same organisation. And we are reading this article called Phoney Fauna from the magazine, December 2014, or volume 34, number 4. Which you can download from our website, skeptics.com.au, for free. And this is part 1 of a 2-part series on this particular topic of Phoney Fauna. Phoney Fauna. When Paul Cropper opened the Myths and Monsters Conference in 2001, which was called the first national meeting of Australia's foremost cryptozoological researchers, he said that, quote, "I think that largely due to the internet, more people are going to find out more about our mysterious monsters, and more people who have had experiences are going to be able to report their sightings. So there will be a lot more information circulating." But he then warned, that's both a blessing and a problem, because a lot of it will be absolute rubbish. I think as researchers we are going to have to become a lot more sceptical. Previously reports were much harder to come by, and hoaxes were relatively rare. Not anymore. Not anymore indeed. The creatures of cryptozoology, cryptids, can be divided into 3 categories. Creatures out of place, creatures out of time, and creatures that never were, or out of legend. Black panthers wandering the Australian bush are a classic example of the first category, creatures out of place. They do exist in some places, but it is unlikely that they do so here. If we are to believe that the Loch Ness Monster is a plesiosaur, then that fits in with the second category. Plesiosaurs did exist, just that they probably haven't done so for a very long time. And then there are the out-and-out monsters who never lived, creatures often out of nightmares or regularly misinterpretations of living animals transposed into something less amiable. These include the chupacabra of Central America and points north, dragons and, depending on your inclination, yetis, yowies and big feet. There are many people who are genuine hunters after unknown animals. In fact, that was the title of one of the first books to deal seriously with the topic, On the Track of Unknown Animals, 1958 in English, 1956 in French, written by Bernard Heuvelmans, regarded by some as the father of cryptozoology. Since then, there have been libraries full of books about creatures of the edge, some serious, some silly, and some that are just out to make a buck. On the silly side, Janet and Colin Bond's book, Alien Animals, is credited as a serious study, though any volume that can cite evidence found in inaccessible places has got to have a serious rethink of its approach. But for every serious researcher, there is a serious faker trying to fool them. Fake monsters have probably been around from the first day there were monster sightings. Modern fakes may be somewhat more sophisticated than in days gone, certainly in terms of photographic evidence, but the audience has not necessarily kept pace with that sophistication. There is still one sucker born every minute and one hoax to cater to them. Now let's look at some hairy stories. When thinking of cryptozoology, it's wise to go beyond the Nessie, Yowie, Yetis and Big Feet. Give some thought to the timid creatures known as furry trout, jackalopes and flabbits. In the hearts of Canadians, home of Champ, the monster of Lake Champlain, Americans, home of Bigfoot, and Australians, home of Yowies, there will always be a soft spot for these lesser-known denizens of the kingdom of mysterious animals, especially as they are shock horror, clearly and obviously and admittedly fakes that some people nonetheless believe in. Fur-bearing trout, also known as beaver trout, possess thick coats of fur that help them keep them warm in the cold northern waters where they live. According to legend, and the very informative Museum of Hoaxes, www.hoaxes.org, quote, the fur-bearing trout was first encountered by Europeans when Scottish settlers emigrated to Canada during the 17th century. One settler wrote home remarking about the abundance of furried animals and fish in the new land. Asked to provide more information about the furried fish, he duly sent home a specimen. Fur-bearing trout, mounted like fishing trophies of the one that didn't get away, can now be found on the walls of many Great Lakes tourist venues and hotels. The Museum of Hoaxes says there are other fur-bearing aquatic animals following in the trout's footsteps, including the fur-bearing crab. But the museum adds that it should be noted that a fur-bearing lobster found recently deep in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Easter Island is not considered to be a tall-tale creature. It is a subject of mainstream scientific inquiry. Seriously. The trout, therefore, are tourist products and have been acknowledged as fakes pretty much from the word go. Similar tourist products with mounted heads on many a bar wall are the American jackalopes. Half rabbit, half deer, jackalopes were first discovered in 1829 in Wyoming. They are known to mimic the singing voices of cowboys and are fond of whiskey, which is a good way to catch one. A large statue of a jackalope stands in the centre of Douglas, Wyoming, which regards itself as the home of the jackalope. Every year the town plays host to Jackalope Day, usually held in June. The Museum of Hoaxes says that jackalope hunting licences can be obtained from the Douglas Chamber of Commerce, though hunting of jackalopes is restricted to the hours of midnight to 2 a.m. and only on June 31. But what of our own flabbit? The flabbit first came to prominence in 1985, when the now-defunct Daily Mirror newspaper devoted its front cover to it. The flabbit was first photographed at Colo, northwest of Sydney. Flabbits are described as simply a rabbit-like creature with wings. Many reports were received from local residents having seen the creatures. 2 specimens were collected and died in captivity. They were preserved by taxidermist Alan Green and exhibited at the Australian Museum and then at various locations around New South Wales. Until recently, the specimen resided in a private museum in Bathurst in New South Wales. Quote, the discovery of the flying rabbit removed murder and mayhem from the front pages of Sydney papers and appeared as the lead story on the current affairs program hosted by Mike Willesee. Went on to call it one of the stories of the year, said an unnamed correspondent to Yahoo Answers. I arrived at this answer as my father discovered the flabbit. this person said. In late October, the flabberds came home to roost. Smelly, moth-eaten, and taxed out of existence at Bathurst, they flapped their way into Hawkesbury City Council chambers to be lovingly cared for in an exhibition either in the new museum or art gallery, but no one knows why. Another correspondent to the same site told the sad news that the private museum in Bathurst was burnt down, apparently by jealous rival owners of another private museum in Orange, which is a town nearby. The specimens delivered to the Hawkesbury City Council chambers were papier-mâché copies. We can't leave Antipodean shores without reference to drop bears. These pleasant little creatures only live to drop out of gum trees onto passing tourists and eat their brains. Sometimes described as the koala's evil twin, the Museum of Hoaxes says that the only known way to deter a drop bear is to spread toothpaste or Vegemite behind your ears and on your neck. It also makes sense not to pitch your tent beneath a tree that contains a drop bear. It says, a good way to find out if a drop bear is in a tree is to lie down beneath the trees and spit upwards. If a drop bear is sleeping up there, it will wake up and spit back. Is a drop bear cryptozoological? Probably not, or no more than the boogeyman. Just something designed to have fun at gullible backpackers' expense and never thought to be real in the first place. Or are they? That's the end of part 1 of this article on Phoney Fauna. I'll be talking about the part 2 soon, looking at some fake fakes. That's the Skeptic magazine, December 2014, volume 34, number 4. You can download this magazine, both parts of the article, from our site, skeptics.com.au.
All right, so you guys ready?
What are we doing?
I'm ready.
We're just going to do a little promo for the Skeptic Zone, and we're just going to ad-lib. So essentially I'll start and then, I don't know, I'll read what he said. Something like, hi, this is Adrienne Hill with Rob Palmer and Susan Gerbic, and we're excited to be going to Csicon in Vegas this year. Come join us at the end of October. Even Richard Saunders will be there. And
okay.
So something to that effect, okay? All right. Hey, everybody.
Action. Oh. Oops, no, I spoke over you.
That's okay.
Take 2, action.
Well, it was good you did that. We got the must giggle in there. So we have to giggle. Okay. Hey, everybody. It's Adrienne Hill. Hill?
Did you say your last name wrong?
I said my last name wrong. Hey everybody, it's Adrienne Hill here from Csicon Studios, and I am joined with Rob Palmer.
Hello, Adrienne.
And Susan Gerbic.
Howdy.
And we're really excited because all of us are going to be going to Csicon in Las Vegas this year.
We are.
And I hear that Richard Saunders is going to be there.
I know.
No.
And I'm looking forward to some spoon bending and maybe even some origami.
Origami earring.
I hear tell that Richard can bend spoons, but even though we have been in the same place at the same time at a previous Csicon, he never did that in my presence. So I definitely need to have him prove that to me.
I think so. So we're going to have him showing off. No, not showing. It's not good. We're going to hopefully he gets showing off. Yeah. We're going to have him show you how to do that. He's shown me many times. I still haven't figured it out.
Do you mean show, like I will be able to do it?
That's what he tells you. He says he gives you lessons.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
You'll be able to explain that it's done, but you don't have the experience to be able to do it.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
You have to practice. I can't see you, Rob, carrying around a spoon everywhere you go. It's just, that's not.
No, I've never seen this done by anybody in person. I've only seen it done on monitors. And I always think it's some kind of video trick because it's so easy to do video tricks.
It was so
Mark
convincing.
Can do it too.
Yeah.
It is so convincing. It looks so
A lot
good.
of exciting people at Csicon this late October, the weekend right before Halloween in Las Vegas, Nevada, at the Flamingo.
Yeah, so what are the dates, Rob?
The 26th through the 29th.
October.
And we hope to see you there. What do you think? Is that good enough?
Yeah, sure, it's fine.
Hello, everyone. This is Adrienne Hill from Skeptic Studio in Calgary, Canada. And I'm here to read the highlights from the Australian Skeptics Newsletter yet again. This is newsletter number 183. You can subscribe to this newsletter and get it delivered to your inbox every other week, complete with links to all the stories. Just visit www.skeptics.com.au. But now, let's see what Tim Mendham has for us this week. Hi all, says Tim. We're having a bit of a boost to reports of ghosts and hauntings lately. The classic skeptical topics always go in cycles, sometimes short-lived and sometimes peaking, so they seem ubiquitous. But why ghosts at the moment is anyone's guess. Haha, I have a guess. It's getting close to Halloween. We receive press stories every day, dozens of them, on the latest haunted pub or ghost tour of a museum. We can understand why the pubs, usually in the UK, do it. Nothing like attracting business with the thought of spirits among the spirits. But museums? Many museums, small and large, especially in the US, are promoting after-dark ghost tours. And these are not little museums desperate for notoriety. They include big ones, like the Smithsonian. The sad thought is what happens when every pub and museum has its own ghost and the novelty wears off. Perhaps the next step is bodies of extraterrestrials in the basement. That would be worth the price of a pint. Read on for more ghost stories and some serious stuff. Tim. Okay, Tim, we'll do just that. By the way, last Saturday was National Ghost Hunting Day in the US, which may indicate that the movement is trending well, and officially. ASI News. Nominate a preposterous perpetrator. The Australian Skeptics Bent Spoon Award goes to the perpetrator of the most preposterous piece of paranormal or pseudoscientific piffle of the year. And yes, I have been instructed by Tim Mendham that I needed to include the P in pseudoscientific to make it alliterate better. So, it's your chance to nominate the wackiest or weirdest claim and claimant of the year. Nominations can be made via the website or by emailing to editor@skeptics.com.au. The winner will be announced at the Skepticon dinner on December 2nd, along with the more positive awards of Skeptic of the Year, the Thornet Award for the Promotion of Reason, and the Wallaby Award for Media Critical Thinking. Update Skepticon 2023. Speaker list growing. The most recent speaker to join the current panoply at Skepticon is John Cook, Senior Research Fellow with the Melbourne Centre for Behaviour Change at the University of Melbourne, who published the 97% scientific consensus on climate change. Tickets cover 1- and 2-day bookings, full price and concession, as well as the dinner itself. Tickets for online viewing are also available. And just as a note, when I was in Australia, I was confused by concession. In Canada, concession means food, and that's not what it means in Australia. Indian skeptic suspended by X. A court in the Indian city of Bengaluru, formerly known as Bangalore, passed an ex parte injunction order to social media company X, formerly known as Twitter, to suspend the account of a doctor known for busting pseudoscience through his regular posts. The Bengaluru Civil Court passed the order in a suit filed by Himalaya Wellness Corporation, which alleged that Dr. Abby Phillips, a hepatologist who works by the name of the Liver Doc on X, made defamatory allegations against the company. Paranormal docuseries from Steven Spielberg. Actually, the headline is misleading. It should be, quote, from Steven Spielberg's company, end quote, not necessarily the man himself. Encounters spans 4 45-minute-long episodes, each examining the concept of alien encounters on Earth through eyewitness accounts, interviews from notable experts, and supporting evidence, including video and photographs of apparent UFOs. This story points out that the series has received a number of mixed reviews from critics and general audiences alike, resulting in a meager 43% audience score on the review aggregate site Rotten Tomatoes. Quote, a number of critics seem to feel that Encounters does a great job of portraying alleged alien activity to those who are already firm believers of alien life on Earth, but does very little to sway the opinions of skeptics who feel that many of the video and photo evidence is fake or the result of military aircraft, end quote. And at least one of the featured cases has been debunked in Brian Dunning's documentary, the UFO movie They Don't Want You to See. You can check that out at the following URL, theufo.movie. The September 2023 issue of The Skeptic is out. It's packed full of essential reading and goodies. The Coles Notes version of the edition includes a look at the risks, the critics, and the hoaxes associated with the final and high-profile days of the golden age of parapsychology. There's also a review of the World Health Organization's promotion of alt-med and the rehabilitation of Uri Geller, at least as far as the New York Times is concerned. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time to do so. You can sign up for a hard copy or digital edition, or both. The digital is offered free to those who take up the hard copy version. Contact the editor if you're not sure if your existing subscription needs renewing. Skeptics in Action. If you have any ideas for stories or want to contribute to Skeptics communications, such as the magazine or Facebook page, or just have something you want to get off your chest, then you're welcome to get in touch. News leads should be sent to newstips@skeptics.com.au. Submissions for the magazine, etc. should go to editor@skeptics.com.au. Comments and suggestions should also go to editor@skeptics.com.au. Items of interest. The history of horror in theater. On-stage scares can apparently be more chilling than the cinema, but scary shows are few and far between at the theater. So few and far between, in fact, that this is a very short article. But we are intrigued by Evil Dead, the musical. More details, please. Travel tip number 1, with caveat. Texas top 10 most haunted bars. An option for your Lone Star State trip. But, as the commentators kindly point out, a little more research would be handy, since one of the haunted pubs is a car park. There hasn't been a pub there for years. Travel tip number 2, with a sort of caveat. The most haunted cities in America. On a broader scale than the story before, a review of the nation as a whole found a range of places worth a visit. And, like the Texas example, at least one of these doesn't exist anymore. And appropriately, it's a ghost town. Travel tip number 3. No caveats this time. The most haunted places in each U.S. state. This is an even broader list, and we have to point out that some of the places in the most haunted cities before don't appear in the most haunted places here. Now where's the scientific rigor? Travel tip number 4. Ireland's most haunted spots. If only to prove not all ghosts are on the other side of the Atlantic, ranging from a man who burst into flames to strangers with Satan's hooves, an Irish ghost hunter has revealed his picks. Yay! Silly haunted house story of the week. Probably haunted for sale sign. Why a property for sale in Massachusetts has a sign reading "probably haunted" on the front lawn is anyone's guess. The agent who authorized it doesn't know, and the sellers aren't saying. It's not a legal requirement. Unlike a handful of other nearby states, Massachusetts has no laws that would require a seller to disclose if a property is allegedly haunted. But from a skeptical point of view, surely being obliged to disclose a place is haunted should mean they qualify for Skeptical Challenge Awards. Or is it? Could it be just a marketing ploy? Well, that's the newsletter. And today's Canadian phrase is Cole's Notes, which refers to a summary or short version of a story or event. This phrase comes from a series of books that are student guides for literature. The guides are summaries and analyses of well-known literature classics such as To Kill a Mockingbird, The Great Gatsby, and the works of Shakespeare. And yes, I have been known to use these in high school and university. Shh, don't tell my teachers. The first published summary was by Cole's Bookstore in 1948. In the US, they are known as Cliff Notes, since the rights were sold to Cliff Hillegrass in 1958. Today, you can still find Cole's Notes, and they are owned by Indigo Books. And that, my friends, is the Cole's Notes history of Cole's Notes. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill.
Hello, this is Maynard. Did you know that you can listen to the Skeptic Zone on YouTube? Yes, I know, sounds crazy, but it's true. Also, you can hear 40 Logical Fallacies with Michelle Bickersma and Funny Sketches with Richard Saunders and a host of other skeptics. Just click on the YouTube links on the homepage at skepticzone.tv.
Once again to look back into those pages at Trove, at trove.nla.gov.au. Of course, we're talking about digitised newspapers, but we're also talking about newspapers from the past stored in other methods, other ways, and popular around the world, well, maybe being replaced more and more by digitising. Is microfilm, microfiche, things like that. And lately I've been going to the State Library here in Sydney, where they have the archive of the Sydney Morning Herald, and going through and finding all sorts of things. And this week we're looking at naturopathy or naturopathy, depending on how you like to pronounce it, and similar things like homeopathy. Now, just on naturopathy or naturopathy, depending on how you want to say it, what does Wiki have to say? Naturopathy or naturopathic medicine is a form of alternative medicine, A wide array of pseudoscientific practices branded as natural, non-invasive, or promoting self-healing are employed by its practitioners, who are known as naturopaths. Difficult to generalize, these treatments range from outright quackery, like homeopathy, to widely accepted practices like certain forms of psychotherapy. The ideology and methods of naturopathy are based on vitalism and folk medicine, rather than evidence-based medicine, although practitioners may use techniques supported by evidence. And this is an extensive article here in Wiki. One of the points I'll make about naturopaths and some chiropractors, and we may well cover this in a future episode of the Skeptic Zone, is how many of these people are vulnerable, susceptible to snake oil salesmen selling nonsense devices and nonsense medicine, because a lot of naturopaths simply do not have the medical or scientific training to know the difference between quackery and real science. So to that end, we start in the year 1990 on the 11th of October. In the pages of the Sydney Morning Herald, the story is "Clinic sprouts up in Balmain." And Balmain is a bayside, I guess you'd call a harbourside suburb here in Sydney. The accompanying picture is of Dr. Glenys Johns, it says, of the Balmain Homeopathic Clinic. And we see Dr. Johns seated in front of an old-fashioned computer. Well, a computer from 1990, so with a big monitor. And she's holding up a jar of, presumably, of homeopathy. And this is a report by Stephen Long. Tired of pill-pushing doctors but can't afford alternative therapies? The Sydney Homeopathic Hospital Clinic might be just the remedy you need. Recently opened at Balmain Hospital, the clinic is run by doctors trained in conventional medicine and homeopathy, a traditional, holistic discipline which uses natural substances, usually to treat chronic illnesses. It is the first outpatients homeopathic clinic in Australia. The Central Sydney Area Health Service set up the clinic in August, using funds from a bequest by William Moore, a devotee of homeopathy who died in 1911. His bequest had previously provided some of the funding for the Sydney Homeopathic Hospital at Glebe. Again, Glebe is another suburb not too far from Balmain, which was closed by the state government in July as part of its rationalisation of health services. Homeopathic treatment at the Glebe Hospital ceased in 1945, but the Area Health Service says there is a renewed interest in homeopathy. Yet, Dr. Glenys Johns, the clinic's director, says the medical profession in Australia is still suspicious of homeopathy. And remember again, this was written roughly 34 years ago. We are not accepted at all. It is very widely accepted in the Northern Hemisphere. About a third of all medical treatment in France uses homeopathy. The profession is skeptical because the reason why homeopathy works hasn't yet been explained, but they will have to bow to patient demand. And as an aside, I'll say you'll still hear this argument to this very day, 34 years later. They say that science is suspicious or skeptical of homeopathy because science doesn't understand how it works. 34 years later. Homeopathic remedies use diluted extracts from vegetables, roots, and other natural substances. Homeopaths claim that for reasons which are not fully understood, substances become more powerful when heavily diluted. It's a like cures like principle, said Dr. Johns. Cut up an onion and you'll get a runny nose, burning eyes. That's typical of the symptoms of a common cold. So if someone comes to me with symptoms like they've been cutting up onions, you give them an onion-based remedy. It's similar to the principles of immunization, she said. You give a tiny dose of measles to prevent measles. And I break in to say I hardly need remind you that in homeopathy you're not getting a tiny dose of anything. The clinic is open Wednesday and Friday afternoons and is staffed by 8 doctors who work on a rotation basis. It specialises in chronic illnesses, everything from eczema and asthma in children to arthritis and gynecological disorders. All doctors offer both homeopathic and conventional care, and all patients are bulk billed. And bulk billed is something in Australia where basically the government picks up the tab. The Area Health Service plans to evaluate the success of the project with resources and equipment from the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital, Camperdown. And our friend, the emergency physician, Dr. Sue Ieraci, has more insights into this clinic. Let's hear from her. Yes, it's Sue Ieraci. Hello, Sue.
Hello, Richard. How
Now,
are you?
I'm fine. I just read out on the show the homeopathic clinic in Balmain. And what I did is I sent that clip to you and you said, oh, I know about that. I thought, oh, really?
Yes, you stirred up a memory that I hadn't thought of for a while. And I was dredging in my memory and remembered that it was one of the early campaigns for Friends of Science in Medicine. And in case people haven't heard of that group, it's a group of both medical people and like-minded people from either within science or sympathetic with science.
A good group, yeah.
Yeah, who believe that any healthcare that's offered to people should be consistent with scientific principles. And, of course, homeopathy is one of the poster child children for the opposite of scientific principles.
It's the central casting applicant for quackery, isn't it?
That's right. And far too easy to make jokes about.
Yeah. Oh, there are many jokes about it. But I was amazed that you knew that particular case.
Yes, and it happens to be that I live not far from there and that I was around in Friends of Science in Medicine at the time that the issue became known. And I'd been aware of the controversy about Balmain Hospital in relation to its change of role many years ago that was basically modified from a general hospital with an open emergency department to be largely an aged care resource.
Right.
And with a rehab role. So the local community was struggling with the fact that it was losing a local resource, with the discussion being that it didn't really have the size of staff or the facilities to be able to function as an effective general hospital in this day and age.
Interesting. So it was there, and people were rolling up and presumably getting their homeopathic medicine, as we read in the report, but it's long since gone.
That's right. And looking back at the news stories now, I remember it was a number of years ago.
Yeah.
But it was because it came to the attention of Friends of Science in Medicine that I think perhaps even the hospital and area health service management of the day didn't even realise that it existed. It flew under the radar, so to speak, to mix metaphors of flying carpets.
Okay, well, that's fascinating.
So for me it was particularly interesting, and for our group, the fact that the homeopathic clinic was being provided by registered GPs, medically trained doctors. And for someone like me who went through medical school where you learn in intimate detail and with high rigour how the body works in terms of physiology and anatomy and pathology, that people could simultaneously hold that knowledge but also be promoting the effectiveness of these hyper-diluted solutions, which in reality didn't contain anything of the original.
Anything, that's right. Yeah.
Even if what they originally contained had any effect anyway.
Well, that's a great point. It's ridiculous things to this like cures like.
That's right.
You know, onions for colds and because the symptoms are similar, or coffee for insomnia. But you don't get it. You don't get the onion. You don't get the coffee. You just get sugar and water or whatever.
Exactly that. And people seem to forget that at the time that this model was put together, it was pre-scientific times. We didn't have the scientific method. We didn't know how to measure ions crossing cell membranes and things like that. So it would make sense in the time in which the person who conceived it was living. It just doesn't make sense now that we know so much more, and it particularly doesn't make sense to be discussing it over the modern internet and social media.
We live in a strange world.
We do, don't we? But we all seem to be able to hold concurrent, conflicting beliefs.
Maybe that's just being human, Sue.
Yes, but people have different capacity for cognitive dissonance.
We do. Thank you. Thank you, Sue Ieraci. Now let's go back to the year 1987, August, the 2nd of August, and what appears to be a regular column by a lady by the name of Dorothy Hall, who was a naturopath at the time, appeared to have a regular column. And this is interesting because it, maybe shows some of the thinking of naturopaths at the time. Keep in tune with nature. Your happiness and health are directly related to what you eat and your attitude to life, says natural living expert Dorothy Hall, Owen Craig reports. Well-known naturopath Dorothy Hall says the secret of happy and healthy living is found in what we eat, our attitude to life and each other, the way we communicate and how we deal with stress. Yes. One of the secrets to eating well is to eat what's in season, says Miss Hall. Eating fruits and vegetables out of season keeps us out of tune with nature, she says. Her advice is to avoid artificial additives in food. Man-made rules break down often, but nature's rules never do. Our approach to food has become anti-common sense. The result of man-made additives to foods is allergies, she says. Allergy is your body telling you these foods are unacceptable. Just as important as what you eat is how you eat it. Don't forget the importance of digestion. Dorothy Hall's golden rules for good digestion are: never eat while you are angry, frustrated, stressed, or having an argument. Sorry, I'm just visualizing two people having a really big argument and then stopping for a hot dog. Food and competition, work, do not mix. Save the largest meal for when you have the most time to digest it. But the best food and regular exercise won't help if your life is miserable. If you do not enjoy your work and do not have a network of supportive friends, it can be as bad for your health as not eating properly. The best brown rice and yogurt in the world won't keep you healthy if you live with someone you hate, Miss Hall says. She finds it remarkable how many illnesses are, quote, caught, end quote, before exams, after leaving home for a new territory, and after the death of a loved one. And as an aside, I imagine that's something to do with a little bit of stress and possibly confirmation bias. We read on. She says the two most important things for happy living and positive thinking are to accept other people as being different from you. Mrs. Hall believes too many people try to make others into carbon copies of themselves. One Richard Saunders is enough, I think. To be emotionally honest with yourself and others, the secret is to communicate what you are really thinking or meaning. What is really going on inside you. People suffer badly from absence of praise for effort, Mrs. Hall says. Humans like praise. It's part of human nature. Consciously making the effort does things for you and the other person. The whole key to living an enjoyable life is to have balance. You have to counteract a bad thing, whether it's an experience, attitude, or illness, with a positive and active reply. Don't wait for the bad thing to pass. Actively make it better. Mrs. Hall says you should concentrate on the simple, enjoyable things in life. Pleasurable things, like going for a walk on the beach at the end of the day, are a must. Look at beauty and listen to lovely music and look at a mountain stream. You have to indulge your eyes, ears, taste, and smell as part of your living day by day, she says. And that whole thing, I guess, boils down to try and be happy. Dorothy Hall's Natural Remedies. Here are Dorothy Hall's tips on how to eat well and stay healthy. Celery, dried seaweed, olives, brown rice and dried figs are rich in vegetable sodium. These foods contain a, quote, natural, end quote, iron, which is an essential compound in the blood. Its main function is to increase the fluidity of movement in the person's body and decrease the calcification of joints, Mrs. Hall says. For calming the nerves, lavender oil, chamomile tea, valerian root capsules, yoga breathing, and even rolled oats porridge are suggested. Yoga breathing. Valerian tea is the highest vegetable source of magnesium phosphate, which Mrs. Hall says can increase the rest value of your sleep. Rosemary oil in your bath water helps you to relax your muscles. Horseradish is good for sensitive respiratory tracts and can be used as a condiment. Before you try any of these herbal cures, however, you should seek a professional naturopathic opinion. The time to begin, quote, doing it yourself, end quote, is after you have found out accurately what your body's health needs are. A naturopath can tell you what you need and in what quantities you need it. According to Mrs. Hall, the best treatment a naturopath can give is to teach people the simple ways of controlling their own health. People who are in charge of their own health don't need health professionals. And that last piece of advice is, of course, plainly ridiculous and dangerous. So there we are, a couple of references in the Australian newspapers, well, the Sydney Morning Herald, to homeopathy and naturopaths. I think we'll dive into more of this sort of health modalities, alternative health modalities in the near future. But of course you can dive into the Trove archives or your local archives whenever you wish. If you go online, I'm sure you'll find a resource for newspapers, because when you go there, or you go to Trove at trove.nla.gov.au, or you go to the State Library in Sydney, New South Wales, Australia, you never know what you might find.
Okay, thank you very much.
Now, before I wrap up tonight, thank you, Tim. Before I wrap up tonight, please indulge me once again, because I have to do the out part of the podcast. This is the part at the end. So you're so practiced. I know you do well. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. And thank you to everybody who's come along here to Skeptics in the Pub. You can all bend spoons, yes. How about that? You can all divine for water. Yes. And you all know how to fool people with power balance wristbands. Yes. What have I done? What have I done? Coming up on the Skeptic Zone podcast next week, more from the Trove archives and lots of other skeptical goodies. Thank you to those people who support the show with Patreon or PayPal. Can't have a show without you. But for this week, from Sydney Skeptics in the Pub, this is Richard Saunders signing off. More. If you listen to the next episode of the podcast, skepticzone.tv, you'll hear all that. So there you go. Thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen. There's some jewellery down here if you care to peruse that. And the magazines, take magazines and DVDs. Thank you. Hey!
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's do the dice game for the show.
Yes, I've done it for years.
Oh, Skeptics in the pub. What a fun time we've been having. Hello, Sue Ieraci. Hi.
Hey, Richard and Skeptics.
And Lara Benham.
Hello, good to see you.
And you, Lara, this is your turn to shine. You've got the 10-sided die. We're going to play the dice game.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Do you have a pen to write down the results?
No.
And it's a really great night here at Skeptics in the Pub. Lots of people have turned up. We're having a fantastic time. Here we go. So, folks at home, Lara's going to roll the first die. What do you think it's going to be, Sue?
I'm going for 7.
I'm going for 6.
2.
And it is?
8.
8. All right. This time I'm going for 8. I'm going to do that.
I'm going for 9.
1.
Here it comes. 4. Oh, come on. One of us must get this.
5.
I'm going to go for 2.
I'm going to go 1 again.
7.
So literally nothing the whole time.
Today's losing numbers are 8, 4, and 7. Thank you.